Everyone in the dusty town gathered to watch the poor cowboy, expecting another humiliation. They laughed loudly when he was told that his bride would be a paralyzed woman who could not even stand beside him. To them, it was a cruel joke, a spectacle meant to break his pride and prove he was worth nothing. But as he looked at her silent eyes filled with hidden tears, something inside his heart shifted. He did not see a burden. He saw a wounded soul who had been mocked longer than he had. The wind grew still, and an uneasy silence replaced the laughter. No one noticed the quiet promise forming in his mind, a promise to protect her dignity at any cost. That unexpected moment marked the beginning of a story no one in that town would ever forget, because fate was quietly rewriting both of their lives forever together. He was a quiet cowboy who owned nothing except a small dusty ranch and a tired horse that understood his loneliness. Every morning he woke before sunrise, fixing fences, feeding animals, and fighting the harsh land just to survive another day. Despite his honesty and hard work, the town saw him as weak and insignificant, a man easy to mock and ignore. Behind his calm face lived years of silent rejection that he never complained about. One afternoon, a group of wealthy men gathered with cruel smiles and announced a shocking plan that would change his life forever. They decided he should marry a helpless, paralyzed woman, not out of kindness, but to entertain themselves and deepen his humiliation. The news spread quickly, and whispers filled the town with cruel excitement, while the cowboy stood still, hiding the storm of emotions rising quietly inside his heart. Before the cruel whispers could settle, he was led toward a small carriage waiting at the edge of town, where the woman sat motionless, wrapped in a faded shawl. He slowed his steps, feeling the weight of many watching eyes, yet he forced himself to look only at her face. When he first saw her, she looked fragile, silent, and full of hidden pain that years of neglect had carved into her expression. Her hands rested lifelessly on her lap, but her eyes held a quiet fear, as if she expected another rejection. In that instant, he understood she had been treated like a burden all her life, passed from one corner of society to another without dignity or care. A sharp ache rose in his chest, stronger than shame, stronger than anger, and it softened his voice before he even spoke. He greeted her gently, not as a joke forced upon him, but as a person deserving respect, and the surprise in her eyes revealed how rare such kindness had been. The crowd waited for him to protest, to laugh, or to walk away, yet he simply extended his hand and promised that she would not be humiliated again. His decision stunned everyone, including the men who arranged the cruel plan, because they expected rage or defeat, not quiet acceptance. As he helped her into the saddle with careful movements, he felt the mocking stares pierce his back, but he chose silence over pride. During the slow ride to his ranch, neither spoke much, yet an unspoken understanding began to grow between them like a fragile light in darkness. She watched the open fields with cautious wonder, perhaps imagining a life where she was not hidden or pitted, while he wondered if he truly had the strength to protect her from a world that enjoyed cruelty. Doubt tried to creep into his thoughts, reminding him of his poverty and lonely struggles, but every time he glanced at her trembling shoulders, his resolve became firmer. By the time they reached the ranch gate, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky with warm colors that felt strangely hopeful. He carried her inside with steady arms, ignoring the whispers echoing in his memory, and placed her near the window so she could see the land that was now also hers. That quiet moment marked the real beginning of their shared journey, built not on mockery, but on a silent promise of dignity. He did not know what trials awaited them, yet a calm determination settled over him as night approached. Outside, distant laughter from the town faded, replaced by the soft sounds of wind across the fields. She seemed uncertain but slightly calmer, sensing she was finally safe. Without speaking, he lit a lamp, signaling that this home would hold patience, respect, and a new fragile hope for both of them, and he silently vowed that no cruelty would ever define her life again from that day forward, forever together. After that silent vow, life inside the ranch began to change in quiet, meaningful ways. Days passed, and he began caring for her with patience and respect, learning every small need without making her feel helpless or ashamed. He repaired a chair so she could sit near the door and watch the sunrise, cooked simple meals, and spoke gently so she would never feel like a burden. At first, she answered only with short nods, her voice trapped behind years of fear, yet he never forced conversation and allowed trust to grow naturally. Slowly, she started smiling, speaking, and trusting him, each small response feeling like a victory that warmed his tired heart. He discovered that her mind was sharp and thoughtful, full of quiet observations about the land and the animals that surprised him. When storms approached, she warned him about loose fences, and her careful suggestions often saved him from trouble. Her gentle nature filled his lonely home with warmth he had never felt before, turning empty rooms into a place that finally felt alive. In the evenings, he would sit beside her, describing the colors of the sky and the distant hills, and she listened with shining eyes as if those simple words were precious gifts. Sometimes she shared fragments of her past, revealing years of neglect that had almost stolen her hope, and each confession deepened his resolve to protect her dignity. He noticed that the laughter from town no longer echoed so loudly in his mind because her quiet courage replaced his old shame with a sense of purpose. Even the ranch animals seemed calmer around her, as if they sensed the kindness in her presence. One afternoon, she managed to lift a cup by herself, and though the movement was small, the pride in her eyes felt powerful enough to silence every cruel voice from the past. He praised her softly, careful not to make her feel pitted, and that balanced respect strengthened the fragile bridge forming between them. Night after night, trust replaced fear, and the house that once held only loneliness began to glow with steady emotional warmth that neither of them expected, yet both quietly cherished. Yet beneath this growing comfort, a quiet tension still lingered, because he knew the world outside the ranch had not changed and judgment could return at any moment. He often wondered whether he was strong enough to stand against society if they tried to humiliate her again. But each time he saw her brave effort to live with dignity, his doubts slowly faded. She, too, sensed his silent worries and began encouraging him with gentle words, reminding him that respect given from the heart was more powerful than any insult from strangers. Their shared resilience created an unspoken partnership, and the lonely cowboy who once walked with lowered eyes now moved with calm confidence across his land. This fragile happiness quietly prepared them for a future challenge neither of them could yet imagine ahead soon. The calm rhythm of their days was suddenly broken when dark clouds gathered one evening and a fierce storm rushed across the fields with violent winds. Animals grew restless, fences started shaking, and the cowboy realized that a section near the barn was about to collapse. He grabbed a lantern and ran outside, but the wind pushed him back, filling his mind with fear that he might lose everything he had struggled to build. Inside the house, she sensed the danger from the rising noise and the trembling walls, and her eyes filled with determined focus instead of helpless panic. One night, a sudden crisis hit the ranch, and despite her condition, she guided him with courage and wisdom, calling out instructions based on what she could hear and remember about the land's weak spots. Her clear voice cut through the chaos, telling him which gate must be secured first and where the animals would run if frightened. He hesitated for a moment, surprised by her calm authority, then followed her guidance without question. Step by step, he fought the storm while her steady directions kept him from making desperate mistakes that could have worsened the damage. The wind roared louder, rain poured heavily, and a wooden beam near the barn finally cracked, forcing him to act quickly. She urged him to use a rope from the old shed and tie the beam to a strong post, reminding him of a repair he once mentioned in passing. That small memory proved crucial, and when he followed her advice, the structure held firm against the storm's force. Her strength shocked him, and he finally saw that her spirit was far stronger than her body, glowing with fearless clarity even when chaos surrounded them. In that intense moment, he no longer saw a fragile woman needing protection but a wise partner who could stand with him against any hardship. Hours later, when the storm began to weaken, he returned inside soaked and exhausted, yet his eyes held a new respect deeper than words. She looked pale but calm, as if guiding him had given her a sense of purpose she had long been denied. He knelt beside her chair, overwhelmed by gratitude, and realized that the cruel joke forced upon him had brought into his life a strength he never imagined. Outside, the ranch stood safe, not because of his power alone, but because of her brave mind and unwavering courage. That night quietly transformed their bond from simple care into true partnership, built on trust, respect, and shared resilience. As silence replaced the storm's roar, he understood that society had judged her only by what she could not do, while ignoring the remarkable strength hidden within her heart and mind. This realization settled deeply within him, preparing him to face the world with a new pride that would soon be tested by those who once mocked them both without mercy again. Morning arrived with a strange calm after the storm, and the cowboy stepped outside to inspect the land that now felt more valuable than ever before. As he walked along the repaired fence, he noticed a group of riders approaching from the dusty road, their silhouettes instantly familiar and heavy with old memories. The same wealthy men who once arranged the cruel joke were returning, likely expecting to witness his failure and laugh at the ruins of his ranch and dignity. A quiet tension tightened in his chest, yet he did not feel the same helpless shame that once haunted him. Instead, he straightened his posture and glanced back toward the house where she sat near the window, watching the horizon with calm confidence. He gently brought her outside so she could feel the sunlight and face whatever was coming beside him, not hidden away as society had always forced her to be. The riders finally stopped near the gate, their expressions ready with mocking curiosity that slowly faded when they saw the ranch standing strong and organized despite the recent storm. Confusion replaced their expected amusement as they observed the repaired structures, the calm animals, and the steady determination in the cowboy's eyes. The same people who once laughed returned, expecting to see his failure, yet they instead faced a man who no longer looked weak or ashamed. He greeted them politely but firmly, his voice steady with quiet authority that made them listen rather than interrupt. Beside him sat the woman they once treated as a burden, but now her composed presence and thoughtful gaze radiated dignity that could not be ignored. Instead of hiding behind him, she spoke calmly about how they protected the ranch during the storm, describing each decision with clarity that revealed her intelligence and courage. The men exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the joke they created had unexpectedly produced a partnership stronger than their arrogance. Instead, they witnessed a proud man standing beside a brave woman who had transformed his life and home with love and dignity. And this silent truth unsettled their shallow expectations more than any argument could. The cowboy did not boast or seek revenge. He simply expressed gratitude for the strength they had discovered together, showing that respect had replaced humiliation within his heart. His calm confidence and her composed wisdom created a powerful image that spoke louder than words, forcing the visitors to confront their own cruelty. The air grew heavy with realization as they saw that the man they mocked had gained honor, purpose, and a loyal companion whose spirit shone brighter than physical strength. Gradually, their mocking smiles faded into quiet discomfort, and some even lowered their eyes, unable to meet the steady gaze of the couple before them. Without anger or prideful speech, the cowboy closed the gate, signaling that his life no longer depended on their approval or judgment. As the riders slowly turned back toward town, a deep realization settled over the land that dignity built on compassion could defeat even the harshest ridicule and stand unshaken before the world forever. The storm had passed, the mocking voices had faded, and the ranch stood quietly under the golden sunset as a symbol of triumph and resilience. The poor cowboy no longer felt ashamed. Every scar, every lonely struggle, and every whispered insult now felt like a path that led him to this moment of honor. Beside him, the woman who had once been a cruel joke sat with a serene smile, her eyes reflecting strength, courage, and the unspoken bond they had forged through hardship. She was no longer defined by her body, nor was he defined by society's judgment. Together, they had rewritten their destinies. The house, once empty, now resonated with laughter, care, and hope, each corner echoing the quiet victories of trust and love. The woman who was given to him as a joke became his greatest pride, proving that true worth is not in physical strength, but in the heart that refuses to give up. And in that moment, their story etched itself into eternity, unforgettable and inspiring.